Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our series of webinars for the hospitality sector. I'm Kevin, I'll be moderating today's session. I must say I'm quite impressed that so many people have joined today, given it's such a beautiful sunny day out there. So extra thanks for taking the time today. We'll be joined by a great lineup of speakers, all experts in their respective fields, who we've handpicked to give you some further insight into the current landscape and what we can expect as we move towards reopening. It's just over 2 months now since the UK went into lockdown. I'm sure I'm not alone when it feels like a lot longer than that. And it's 1 month since we held the first part of this webinar. I know a lot of you joined, so thanks for coming back, and I hope you find this session timely and equally beneficial. The speakers that we have on the call today are, firstly, backed by popular demand. We have Christian from Tenzo. We've also got Gil from Top Source, James from Truffle Hunting, and I'm really excited to be joined by a couple of operators as well this time. We've got Alison from Yo and also Barak from Morso. They've all joined me to discuss the current trends and have a look into the future at what things might look like when sites reopen. The very fact that we keep referring to and hearing about this new normal suggests that it will be far from the old normal. And I think we're all intrigued to know what it's going to look like. Can you change the slide, please? So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Kevin. I work for Planday, managing our relationships with key partners. For those of you that don't already know Planday, we provide a software platform which helps hospitality businesses manage their workforce more effectively. People use Planday to manage their staff rotas, time and attendance, HR, communications, payroll, etc. We make everything digital and accessible on mobile or any device. We do a lot of interesting work with our partners, such as those joining me today, Tenzo, Top Source, and Truffle Hunting. We do have some others that don't begin with the letter T. I think that's just a coincidence. But collectively, we offer a complete suite of solutions to help hospitality operators optimize all areas of their business. And that's something that I'm sure we'll touch on during the webinar in terms of how technology might be even more prevalent in the post-coronavirus landscape. Given that the huge majority of our customers and users are in the hospitality sectors, so when your businesses are hurting, so is ours. It's a challenging time for us all, but also a time to come together. So we want to use this time to provide some insight for you and share as much information as possible to make sure that our restaurants, our cafes, our hotels, our pubs, which are so important in our society and our local communities, can bounce back as strong as possible. Next slide, please. So a month ago, Christian, our CEO, presented this slide, well, this image. So I thought it might be useful to revisit this and see what's changed between then and now. The truth is, not a lot, but I can sense that the mentality and the focus has shifted. Whilst the picture is becoming a little bit clearer, we're still facing 3 unknowns. Firstly, we still don't know how much the crisis will cost us. But what we have seen in the last month is many operators have shifted focus from cash flow and firefighting to reopening. And that's largely been possible due to support provided from government, landlords and suppliers. I actually heard an interesting statistic recently, which I found quite shocking, that on average, a hospitality business has 16 days to survive without revenue coming into the business. So the fact that we're here 2 months into the crisis really highlights the need for this external support to get through this. Secondly, in terms of how long the disruption will last, again, still unknown, but a lot of businesses will be in planning mode now to open their doors again in some form from the 4th of July. And I saw that UK Hospitality today launched their roadmap and submitted the 75-page document advising on what's needed to make that happen. But I think the really interesting topic for today is around the shape of recovery. How can hospitality businesses operate with social distancing restrictions in place? Is that even viable financially? What impact will it have on brands and on customer experience? How long will it take for people to feel comfortable in a busy restaurant environment? And that's really what we want to talk about today. Next slide, please. So if we look at the agenda, we'll kick off with Christian from Tenzo. He'll talk us through what we know from the data, what are the trends, and what is the current and near future picture. Once the scene has been set, I'll be joined by 4 other speakers, Gil, James, Barak, and Alison, to discuss more about what we can actually do to prepare ourselves for the new normal, providing us with insight from multiple different perspectives. And finally, we'll be taking your questions and offering advice and guidance where we can. Next slide, please. So on that note, we're using a tool called Slido, which enables you to ask your questions. You'll also be able to see everyone else's questions and vote on the ones that you would like to be answered, so we can then prioritize those for you in the Q&A session. Please go to your web browser and type sly.do, then enter the code, which is United We Stand, and then you can start asking questions and voting. Next slide, please. So I'd like to welcome Christian, CEO and co-founder of Tenzo, an ex-restaurateur himself. Christian then used his background in digital technology to co-found a software business, providing a really great data analytics tool for bars and restaurants. Hi, Christian.
Hi, Kevin.
So you and I have spoken a lot over the past couple of years, and probably more so over the last couple of months. So I know you've got some really great insight into the current situation, both from your own knowledge, but also from your blogs, your podcasts, and the data within the Tenzo platform. Perhaps before you go into that, maybe you can just give us a quick background on yourself and explain Tenzo in a few words for those who don't know.
Great, thanks a lot, Kevin, for having me today. So yeah, as you said, initially studied computer science and then decided to start a chain of restaurants, which was probably not the most obvious career choice at the time, and ran that chain of restaurants for a number of years. And really, what really struck me when I ran that chain of restaurants was how hard it was. Well, it's a very difficult business, as everyone on this call will know. But I found it very hard to really get access to the information that was happening in the business. So how how much revenue we're making, how much we're spending on labor, on inventory, etc. And especially getting those insights in the hands of my GMs. And that's really why I created Tenzo, which connects to platforms like Planday, but also POSs and inventory, to bring it all into one place so that your GMs can see that information on mobile and help them predict future sales, for example, as they go along. So that's Tenzo in a nutshell. If we could go to the next slide, Dom, that would be great. So given that introduction, if you could go to the next slide again. So I'd like, as Kevin was saying, I want to give a bit of a lay of the land. On part one of this webinar, we talked a little bit about how COVID had hit the industry initially. And this time I'd like to talk about three main topics. One really around how the restaurant industry is slowly reopening, but this reopening is accelerating. A little bit about what's going to happen next, and looking to China and other countries that have gone through the crisis before the UK and Europe. And then finally, some actions that restaurateurs can take now in order to prepare for their reopening or going through the next few months as we emerge from the lockdown. If we could go to the next slide, please, Dom. So we selected a number of locations that we felt were representative of businesses, restaurants in London that we work with. So 117 locations, which prior to the 16th of March were all open, and there's been. So at the 16th of March, we see this initial drop. This is when the government advised against going to restaurants, but didn't ask them to close, just asked people not to go. Some restaurateurs obviously heeded the warning and decided to close at that point. A week later, the biggest chains, including Pret, McDonald's, KFC, Nando's, decided to shut their locations. And that's really where we nearly touched bottom on the 30th of June. A week later, and this feels like a long time ago, on the 6th of April, when Boris Johnson was hospitalized, Austria was looking to their plans to reopen, and Wuhan had lifted its lockdown. That's where really we saw the greatest number of locations closed in our sample. And really, ever since that, we have seen it gradually go up until, including last week, which Boris Johnson announced the phased reopening, including some hospitality businesses at the beginning of July. And really, that trend has continued, and we've seen actually an acceleration in the last week in terms of opening. And if we could go to the next slide, Dom. And really what's underpinned this is really some of the large brands that have announced reopening plans. Here I just selected a handful just to give a bit of a flavor, but you've got people like Nando's that what they've been trying to do is really test and learn, if you want, like open a small sample, 7 out of their 392 on the 28th of April, where it was really to learn how to operate. They hadn't done delivery before. They launched their delivery service with Deliveroo at that point. And similarly, other brands, including Burger King and KFC, which have really announced that they were going to be reopening all their locations by the end of June. This morning we heard that Cafe Nero is launching on Uber Eats its deliveries. Pizza Express is looking at delivery only. So what is happening is that these big brands are really kind of leading the way, and we're seeing that a lot of the smaller chains are now also starting to properly think about these plans, including some that never closed throughout this period, but there are a lot now that have coming together and planning their how they reopen. If we could go to the next slide. So what happens next? Next slide, please. So we've looked a little bit of data from China and other sources, and what this graph is showing us is on the top you see the countries, the flags of the different countries that were that took part in this study. And what this study was looking at the expected spending per category that people were going to make over the next 2 weeks compared to usual. So if the color is black in this graph, it means that they're expecting to spend less than half what they used to spend previously. And you can see that across the US, the UK, France, Italy, all these countries are expecting to spend less than half on quick service restaurants and restaurants. But if you look at China on the right-hand side of the graph, you can see that their intention has changed, where you're seeing that is now between 0 and 15%, or 15% and 30%. So just to be clear, still a big drop, but that is starting to change there. And there is a desire to start consuming again food outside. So some light on the horizon there. If we could go to the next slide. And really, the message we have been talking to all our customers about, and I think is becoming clear from the fact that this is not going to be a V-shaped recovery. This will take time, especially getting customers feeling confident to be eating out again. We've really been talking about diversifying away from eating in, and this, if you look at, these are customers in the UK now, and whether they would be concerned about going out to the restaurants. So 51% are saying they would be concerned going out to restaurants to eat in the future. Cooking with friends, so smaller gatherings at home, for example, that would be still 32% are concerned. And then really ordering delivery, where there's the least concern in a way, where it's like 22%. So really thinking about the channels and not expecting eating in a restaurant to really recover overnight. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so some of the trends that we've observed coming out of China, firstly, like really this opportunity for tasty, convenient DIY home meals. So basically the items to make the meal come shipped to your house, and then you follow instructions to make the meal yourself. So 69% of Chinese consumers are spending more money on food at home. People are clearly working still from home in China at the moment, and clearly here pretty much everyone who can is. And 40% of that segment has now learned how to cook, really, and are cooking from scratch, compared to just 26% pre-COVID. So clearly those trends are there and are still continuing in China, although they have come out of the lockdown and are several weeks, if not months, ahead of us. Demand for visibility around product sourcing and safety. So this is a really important one, and really communicating to customers around the safety of your product. I've seen Pure, for example, doing a very good job at communicating to their newsletter about why it's safe, how they're looking after their team, and how they're looking after the safety of their customers. And I think the more you communicate around that, the better it will be, both in terms of on social media or by email, but also when they're coming into stores. So like having teams wearing face masks, making sure that there's sanitizer out, etc. Like just really highlighting that safety piece. Health foods, and so that's supports wellness and immunity, are growing rapidly. 75% of consumers in China are now saying that this is like a major concern of theirs. And then finally, seniors really looking to buy online or order delivery. So the segment that initially before COVID was not really ordering that much online or deliveries, have really started discovering that and ordering more online. So thinking about the menu, to think about how that caters for this new segment of the population who's ordering online, it is key here. If we could go to the next slide. And so now I just would like to talk about a few actions that restaurateurs can take with this in mind. These are just initial thoughts. Obviously, this is developing constantly, and we're keeping this advice up to date. But if we could go to the next slide and run through those, that would be great. So as I've said, diversifying away from eating, what does that mean? And we're hearing a few things here. So clearly delivery, which I think everyone is looking at. Click and collect. I've heard some of our customers think about how they define 15-minute periods where they'll ensure that only 5 people come in per 15-minute period on this click and collect. So being able to define that helps with social distancing. And people want to go out now and just walk around the corner or walk down to their local to pick something up. So that's working quite well. Curbside pickup is something that Nando's has been doing in a number of countries, not so much in the UK, but where you drive up into to the parking lot of a restaurant, and then the team puts the meal you've ordered in the boot of your car, so that there's no interaction at that level. And then finally, DIY home meals, where we've seen a lot of brands like look at sharing their recipe books or giving the ability to order their products online to then be able to make these meals at home. Another point here is really around how thinking about your menu, and in particular in the context, in a couple of contexts. One really around healthy meal options, as this will be something that will keep growing and is really something that's front of mind for a lot of people. But also really thinking about streamlining the menu, so for delivery in particular. This is not an environment where they've got one of your waiters that they can ask questions to, so really making it simple, reducing the choice so that there's less to scroll through, and ordering delivery is by word for convenience, really, and really making sure that it's convenient to choose. So even bundling products is something that's important to think about. Looking at the data to see what are your best sellers, and looking maybe at the bottom 20% and saying, okay, I'm going to delist those ones and try other ones. So really making sure that you're keeping that tight. And then very importantly, as a lot of these platforms take a significant percentage of the cost of the meals that you're selling, really thinking about what that price should be so that there is enough margin post these delivery charges. So there's really an opportunity here to think about how you price in this vertical in particular. And then finally, this communication with customers on safety of products. There's a great guide that the Black Sheep restaurants chain in Hong Kong has put together with some great tips as to how to, it's the COVID-19 handbook, which has tips about everything, how to operate, but also how to think about the communication with your customers. And communication in particular at this time is critical with your teams, to make sure that they know what to expect and when to be going back to work, and with your customers to know that what they can order and why it's safe. And obviously with your suppliers and partners, I think what we've been doing at Tensorf is really try to communicate with everyone and be very clear with everyone that we work with. So I think that's, especially as we come out of this is going to become even more important. So that's a few thoughts from me on all that. I'll be around for the Q&A also. But thank you all very much for your time. I think you're muted, Kevin. Yeah.
Thanks, Christian. Some great insight there from the data and comparisons from other markets. I think it'd be really interesting to hear some of the operators later on, to hear maybe Barak and Alison's experience against that backdrop. And I'm sure the audience will have some questions for you a bit later on.
Definitely. Thank you.
Cool. And just a reminder on that, you can add your questions on Slido. Just go to www.sly.do, enter the event code United We Stand, and you can ask questions and vote on the questions that are already there. Just on that, there's already a couple of people asking if the slides will be shared. And yes, indeed, after the session, we'll share both the slides and the full recording of the session with you all. So just to sum up there, after Christian, there's some great insight, but it clearly highlights that this crisis isn't going away. And businesses are going to have to continue to adapt as we go through this slow process of reopening and instilling confidence in customers. Right, so now we have 4 new speakers. Next slide, please. Here we have Gil, James, Barak, and Alison. So it'll be great to get all your advice from your respective angles. If we start with Gil, next slide. So Gil, I know you've been working in the hospitality and leisure business for many years now. No doubt this has been one of the most challenging times you've seen. But being CEO of a payroll and accountancy business and looking after your customers' needs and inquiries over the last couple of months on furlough, etc., I'm really interested to hear your insight on the compliance aspect and that job retention scheme. You know, the new word that we've all learned, furlough, and the big question mark now hanging over how that support might change, I guess, in that next period between July and October.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, as Kevin said, we work with a lot of leisure sector businesses, and we've witnessed a lot of the difficulty that people have gone through in terms of the revenue side. Of course, that's obvious, but also the difficulty of navigating what seems to be complex or uncertain legislation and the landscape around that. So I'm just going to go through three takeaways. That's it, with a real focus on what we have facing us with furlough, because that seems to be the one thing that we're carrying on with right now. So next slide, please. The first one is the expectation that flexibility is forthcoming. So government has made clear that there will be changes. They're going to come out with what those changes are. And we're likely to see some indication of that this month. But the principal difference is going to be from an absolute furlough program, minimum 3-week time period, you can't work for your employer, these sort of restrictions, to more of a European model where there'd be flexibility in that furlough. And that's great. It's great for businesses and it's great for employees, but it's not entirely our friend in this process. And the reason for that is the complexity of understanding when I am furloughed and when I am just not working becomes a record-keeping issue for every business. And there's a lot of data that you're going to have to hold on to for a long period of time to defend your furlough decision-making. So thinking through where it's a fairly binary situation now, you have employees, they're on furlough 100% of the time, and you apply for a grant, you receive the funds. Going forward, it's likely going to be a much more integrated set of dynamics that will have to be submitted to HMRC. And we also believe pretty strongly outside of leisure that HMRC is going to be checking furlough data from clients. Less so in this sector, we believe, because it's fairly simple. You are working or you're not. But going forward, you might furlough for a week, you might furlough for a shift, you might furlough for a day. And this will become particularly important if you're using A and B shifts, or you have A shift Monday and B shift Tuesday as an example, so you don't have workers commingling to prevent potential infections. So you want to think this through, be very, very careful in terms of your calculations, make sure they're defensible, make sure they're consistent, and likely if you meet those two basic parameters, HMRC will leave you alone. But bear in mind, your employees are going to be confused by this. Your business managers will be confused by this. So once the new rules come out, I encourage you, make sure that you look back at your record keeping till date with furlough. Make sure that you have a system processes, however you track this information, that it's very, very tight. One thing you don't want to do is have any drama with HMRC over this or with your staff. Next slide, please. The other thing is getting people back to work. Sounds great. You can come off of furlough and then we can furlough you again. And there's a lot of excellent dynamics that can come with this. But you have to bear in mind that certain things have been occurring in the background in your business that you might not be aware of. One in particular that we highlight is the accrual of holiday while I'm on furlough. And this is a liability that is accruing today for any business that has furloughed staff. You can pay the holiday now. Not many of us have the cash flow to do that. You can top it up within the furlough program, but it is a liability that is accruing. And when you bring people back off of furlough into the business, you might face a situation where you've asked for people to come back, an A team and a B team as an example, and half of team A has elected to take their holiday, which is accrued. So you have to be very careful with communication with your staff. You have to be very careful again with your record keeping, and you have to bear in mind that this is a liability that is building up in your books. It will be due to them, and what we're hoping is that businesses will be able to trade through the difficult period, and as things resume, which we're very hopeful they will for everybody, that as the business can support it, that then employees will take their time off. But do bear in mind, you have this responsibility to them, and it could impact how you schedule, when people take time off. The second thing about that is they have changed the rules on the carryover of holiday to 2 years, whereas historically it was only 1 year. So bear in mind this, you're able to spread this liability out over a longer period of time, but it is still there. It's sitting in your books, whether you've accrued for it or not. And again, record keeping is critical for this. I know it sounds like a fun little admin job, but it's absolutely essential to prevent problems going forward. Next slide. And takeaway 3, they're hidden costs. So I mentioned holiday, that's one. The second is that furlough funds you receive are a grant. They are a grant to the business. It's not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. It is a grant. However, it is taxable. It is not just taxable at NI and PAYE for the employee, it's taxable to the business as a grant. So one thing you have to also consider within the financial dynamics of furlough, beyond just payroll processing and tracking it and making sure there's no drama with HMRC, is that there's a liability associated with the receipt of these funds. And I think that's going to be a very important issue for businesses as they reopen and they realize the number of staff they actually need. Government's going to want you to bring as many people back on as you can, but you're only going to bring in those that you need. They're going to try to keep the furlough costs down, of course, for government, but they also don't want to have people unemployed. So this is going to be a very interesting dynamic. Unfortunately, I think government's going to make a business's problem to really manage through this. And as you're looking at it, if you talk to your finance team or whoever's working with you in payroll and accounting, whether it's internal or external, make sure that you've challenged them on the question of what's the actual underlying cost of keeping furlough running. The right thing will be different for every business, but the liability will be existent for everyone. So just 3 basic, next slide, please. 3 basic points. It's a great program in our view. We're very, very happy it's working. It seems to have worked very well, but it is going to become more complex with the flexibility forthcoming. There will be hidden costs that you're carrying, and we encourage you to watch out for those, both on the labor side in terms of holiday, but also, again, on the accrued liability associated with receiving the grant funds. So that's it, very, very simple. Again, I'll be available for questions at any point in time during the presentations that follow. But Kevin, thank you and your team for organizing today.
Our pleasure, Gil. Thank you. Some more great insights there, and some really useful tips on the financial side. And I'll just remind everyone again, with the questions coming in, we will be sharing the recording of this session and all the slides with you, so you can refer back to those tips if you need to. So next up, hi James, we have James from Truffle Hunting. James, you have a lot of experience in advising hospitality businesses as well as being an operator yourself. So I'm keen to hear what you and your clients have been doing to adapt where possible and maybe offer a slightly different service, catering in their local communities.
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, it's interesting because we've got a variety of clients and different sites that we operate. So whilst we're finding at the moment there's less of the concept and development work that we might be doing at points, there's a lot of work to look at how we can start to move forward from here. Perhaps if we can go on to the next slide, we can just start talking about how different people are looking at revenue and how they can start to drive it. It's really clear that, you know, if we're closed, there are certain fixed costs that we just can't get rid of. So there's a drain on your bank account. So whatever we can do to start staging that reopening process is vital. So we're looking at a variety of different ways with different clients, you know, whether it's starting with collections and then adding on a delivery service, which we did a trial last weekend that was very successful at one place. And understanding the next phase might be gardens opening or external spaces. So we really need to understand how we can try and deliver the DNA of each business into the home or wherever we're trying to engage the customer. Aggregating whatever we're doing with that to try and make sure that we tell the full story and create any opportunities from revenue is also key. So whilst we're starting to build websites and some apps with some people, just thinking through each revenue stream as an individual. So say we're doing a barbecue pack, a lot of people are doing barbecue packs. How can you take what the butcher brings, apply your DNA, and then consider the additional sales of, could you supply a sustainable charcoal or a barbecue, for example? And then thinking of the convenience that you can bolt onto the side of that as well. So adding in some wine sales. Is there a cocktail for two that you could do? How can you further sort of explore the opportunities to make those sales? That being said, what we're also trying to do is understand how we can make this as efficient as possible. We had a client who pivoted very quickly at the beginning of this, had a farm shop, restaurant and delicatessen. And whilst the restaurant had always contributed over 2/3 of their revenue as a business, as soon as that disappeared in the middle of March, the pivot towards online sales became crucial. But then you've really got to manage that customer experience. If people are trying to buy things and order things and you don't have them available anymore, how can you bolt on a sort of e-commerce platform and an integration to an inventory management tool? So not only can the customer be prevented from ordering something you don't have, it also helps drive an understanding of your ordering processes. So it's just about starting to try and organize yourself around how you're delivering each of these offers. And then it comes really down to engagement. There's a different purpose behind each of the sites we operate. So some are Michelin and work with, some are Michelin starred, and some are very localized businesses in one in Surrey, for example, that found the opportunity to really support the local community. And being mindful, the lessons that were learned in being mindful in how you communicate with people, not only your team internally, making sure that people aren't feeling stressed through the processes, but fully understand the new systems you've got in place, allows you to then communicate properly with your customer to give them confidence. You know, Christian referred to Black Sheep Restaurant's COVID playbook, and taking something like that so your staff really understand what you're trying to do and how you're trying to support people in safety and in the level of hospitality and service you're wanting to give is really important. But then I don't know about everyone else, but I'm finding I'm getting bombarded by the amount of emails I'm getting from all sorts of businesses that are trying to communicate. So I think it's also important to focus on succinct marketing communication that gives the confidence, that allows you to explain how you're delivering your experience to them, but not bombarding them, because actually that could just be detrimental and you lose a lot of people to communicate to. And just one other point on the revenue before we move on is, how can we create additional stories? We had a client who ran an event last week, which was a sort of cat-eye barbecue, a lot of slow and low cooking being done at the site. They package up the whole barbecue experience and sold it on to people to have at home. And they ended up doing, I think they did 75 people the first week and 95 the second week. So that suddenly gives an additional experience that they're being able to offer people, which is of interest. Perhaps we could move on to the next slide. So really, we're talking about sustainability, the economics of sustainability, and we all know the pollock or the fish we buy is important to be sustainable there, but the most vital bit of sustainability is cash at bank. And there's a lot of issues, as Gil was just saying and highlighting parts of. There's a tipping point of viability as we start to come back into this staged opening. Any flexibility we can glean from government and how we do that will be useful, but understanding that balance between furlough and how rent comes back to us as well, it's going to be very crucial to understand. So we're encouraging all our clients to talk and have a really open dialogue with their landlords to make sure that they get the opportunity to put their views forward, but also understand very clearly what is likely to be offered to them as we start to hear more. So taking that into account, we've been working through with everyone a reforecasting process. It's impossible to be looking back at where we were last year and year-on-year calculations, or even the financial models we might have put in place for this year. So each stage we're costing out. So for example, if you're starting off with the collection, understanding what your profitability is, understanding your break even from that, so what you can contribute towards the costs of the business. One model we work with a client today, even if we manage to do 122 covers a week through collection, we know we'll break even on the amount of staff we've got and the rent that we charge at the moment. But we can see clearly that after 1 month, the bank account will be £8,500 better off than if we were just closed and incurring the interests and insurance and all of these other fixed costs that we can't completely do away with. So really understanding what each stage can mean to your cash flow as you start to look forward is really important. And we're encouraging everyone as well to look a little bit further ahead. You know, maybe you usually look at a 3-month cash flow. Well, why not start looking into 2021? So as you're starting to look at how you think that staged opening will happen, how Christmas might affect, if you can see that net effect 9 or 12 months out, so you can better have the ability to act early and prevent finding yourself in a cash crisis at some point, and then that would be a very good practice to make sure you have in place. If we could move to the next slide, please. So we've got our revenue. We're starting to work out how we're going to drive revenue. We've got our plan of what we think is going to happen, but then of course we need to analyze what actually happens in real time, because it always comes at us slightly differently. And for us and all our clients, we work on a real-time analysis of knowing exactly where we are, using tools like Planday and Tenzo are really critical. There's other things out there as well that you can use to just help make it a very efficient and maximized information flow, so you can act on things very quickly. And quite often we find that there's an added benefit in the fact that it reduces administration time if you integrate these tools properly and well. Additionally, once you start looking at the integrations, trying to understand your customer behavior as much as possible so you can better target your marketing. So even integrations from your into your CRM from your EPOS, so you can really see whether people are, how people are behaving, how they're approaching you from collection, how they start to engage once they start coming back to you, and really understanding the value of the customer is going to help you act. So, you know, the key to this really is in any way you can empower your team with concise information that will benefit you in terms of efficiency and profitability is really what we're trying to drive people towards. I think that's at this point, Kevin.
That's great. That's great. Really, really interesting. Thank you, James. And you know, margins are tight anyway, so it's a real balancing act at the moment. And also, you should see it making me hungry talking about barbecues and slow cooked meat, and with the sun shining in here. So thanks for that. Some great real life examples, which I'm sure resonate with a lot of you listening. And you'll no doubt have some questions in the Q&A. And on that, I can see there's some questions coming in, but I just encourage you to go to Slido. So it's www.slide.do, enter the password or code United We Stand, and put some questions in there for the Q&A. Hi, Barak. Next, we have Barak from Morso. I've known Barak now for a couple of years. Great entrepreneur, industry networker, trainer, mentor, technology expert. The list goes on. So I've also seen some great stuff on LinkedIn and social media that you've been doing, Barak, in your local communities. So it'd be really interesting to hear about the journey that you've had to go through over the last couple of months to kind of reinvent yourself, and how you've then set yourself up to come out on the other side.
Yes, Kevin, thank you very much for having me on today, and for the very nice introduction. If we can skip to the next slide already. I'm one of the co-founders of Morso. We are a team of partners. Morso is a small restaurant in St. John's Wood. We're doing fresh pasta, grappa cocktails, and small bites. And for us, it has been an interesting journey right when this COVID crisis hit, because we just spent £250,000 opening a second restaurant. And we just opened it a week before the lockdown had been announced. So we had to make pretty quick assessments as to the viability of the business and really rally the team, because it was a matter, for me, I think a lot of operators hit that wall where it was a matter of life and death. You thought, are we going to make it through? Is it worth fighting for? Or do we, throw our hands in the air and give up? But that one of the lessons we learned is that it's very useful being in a team of partners. So whilst my partners were busy looking after some aspects of the business, I was freed to really look at the the government statements and what other countries are doing, and trying to analyze where it was leading us. And really, from the middle of February, early March, it was clear we were going to go for lockdown. And as a business, we decided that we're going to try and fight it and see it through. And also, we've built excellent community relations over the 2 years we've been running, which was important for us to maintain. In a sense, it was also a realization that it's a bit like Luke Johnson put in his letter on Sunday. It's a cruel world, but those restaurants who will survive probably will enjoy an increased market share at the other side of the crisis. And we intended on being one of those. if we can skip to the next slide now. Our analysis really was focused on three areas, which were key for us to ensure that we can continue trading. One of them was the preservation of cash. I know it's been discussed here before. But there were some cruel decisions to be made in the business. We work. You only find out how many suppliers you work with when you make a list of all the people you need to call and say, I can't pay you this month. But we work with dozens of suppliers and service providers, and it's really, really, really key to pick and choose who you must pay and who not. We did not enjoy any benefit, we didn't get any joy from our landlords, so we are still paying full rents in both locations. But which means you have to try and mitigate costs in another place. And we have gone through a stage where we were making cash flow projections every day, at the end of every day. And in the uncertain environment where you're not sure what government grants will be given, how quickly will they be made available, etc., it was really important just to hold tight to your cash and be a little bit aggressive with that. The second was our staff. We've just doubled the team size to open a second restaurant, and now we had to send everybody home, or the majority of the team home. And I think in this sense, communicating, letting people know what's happened. Most of our staff are foreigners, so they're people who live here alone. Their families are abroad, and they were extremely worried as well. I mean, they got families in Italy and in Brazil and in Spain, some of the worst stricken places. One of our team members got engaged, and his partner is in Taiwan, and he can't meet them. They had to cancel the wedding. So it's about being there for the team, not just communicating and telling them, you're furloughed and stuff, but actually taking the role of a family and saying, look, if you need advice, if you're worried, if you don't know what to do, we can help. And the last was to talk to our community. I mean, I just mentioned we spent $250,000 opening a restaurant. Most of it was funded by crowd. So we have a bunch of people who have supported us. A lot of them are neighbors and clients of the restaurant, of the first restaurant. And it was important for us to send the message out that we are making every effort to stay open. We are being creative, and we will support our community in return. So a lot of our community went into self-isolation very early on, and we wanted to let them know that we can take food out to them if necessary. If we can take to the next slide now. So what we did, so there are 3 slides now with a list of actions we've taken, and I'll just go by them, and maybe the Q&A will get a chance to provide more detail. Essentially, and I said we used Planday to talk to our team. I think one thing I found was Planday was extremely effective as a communication tool, where when the crisis happened, and even before furlough, you had to reduce the level of labor quite significantly, and a lot of people waited at home and they didn't know when the next shift will come in. I think Planday, the ability to send messages to the entire team, to put attachments on, to do a force read on the messages, to push shifts and all of that, really helped us to stay in touch, where some companies, you have to use WhatsApp and create groups and all sorts of stuff. We knew that we have one tool that helped us stay in touch with our team. That's from the team size. From a sales point of view, we launched our website ordering platform actually a week before the lockdown. So we were slightly ahead of the curve. We added a web page on our website. We listed all of our items on it, and which helped, as I think Christian mentioned, the cost of Deliveroo. Well, Deliveroo are doing a great job, by the way, marketing for us. I know people are complaining about the commission, but they're actually a great shout. And they've helped a lot also in the crisis. But you want to make sure that you can reserve as much cash as you can. So we encouraged our customers to order directly from us on our website. And we also stocked up on items that we're not normally selling in an Italian restaurant. So we had toilet papers and soaps and hand sanitizers and face masks and milk and sugar and flour and everything that we thought people in the community might need. So we turned into a little delivery grocery store. One other thing we did was we extracted the list of all of our clients from our booking system and from our CRM, and again in this to this extent we use another bit of technology. We use Sprout Send, and again Dylan was very helpful in helping us setting up the initial campaigns. But we just bombarded everybody we know. Basically, we made thousands of phone calls. I had my team, instead of sitting at home, coming to the restaurant and making phone calls. We had 5,000 numbers to call. It took us 3 weeks to get through them, and neighbor by neighbor, saying, we know you're stuck at home, we can deliver. This is the link, and let us know if you need help. So between phone calls and email campaigns and flyer drops, we really managed to reach out to our community. And again, very early on. So as the crisis became sort of got worse, we were well positioned to look after our community and retain some of our revenue channels. Next slide, please. One more thing we've done is we contacted a local hospital. And again, one of our missions was to stay busy. We didn't know how long this were going to be for. And I have to say, I thought it will be over by now. But I wanted to keep the team busy, and I wanted to keep the management team busy, and also the staff busy. And one way to do it was we reached out to a local hospital, St. John's Hospice, and we offered them meals, and we've been cooking for them once a week since then, the staff lunch. And I think it gave great feeling to the team, and it really built a good relation for us with the hospital. Later on, a local charity reached out to us, and they're actually buying meals from us now at a reduced price, but it works fantastic. So we get our team to work, and they can, hundreds of meals are being sent every week to local hospitals with that network. Another thing, and again, this is, if I can, give any advice to businesses, and this is quite late in the crisis now, is to be open and sort of transparent with your suppliers. There were many days when we thought, we don't want to answer the phone anymore. But in reality, we made a list of everybody we owed money, and we reached out to each one of them one by one, and we said, well, we were entering this crisis, we're preserving cash, and we need to break the balance into small payments to make sure that we can make it to the other end, and we can use you again when we can reopen. And overwhelmingly, the suppliers have accepted our terms, which helped us a lot in terms of cash. But also we've agreed with all of our key suppliers cash on delivery moving forward, so we're not increasing our outstanding balances. But as we were selling more food, we did not close. We were delivering at about 60% of our normal volume of sales. We needed to make sure that the meat and the veg and everything kept on coming, and we were paying for these orders cash, which means we were not increasing our debt. Again, I mentioned we have a big community of investors, and it was important to let them know that we're doing everything we can to look after their money. And again, there's an element of positioning there. You want them, I want to be able to go back to my investors in 3 months or 6 months and say, guys, we've done great, we saved your money, we saved the business, and now let's do another round and buy a third restaurant. And to do that, you have to be able to communicate clearly and make sure everybody is on board and they know the actions you're taking. And finally, I know we talk about saving cash, but actually you need to spend a little bit of money to be heard. So we increased our online budget. We advertised on Facebook and on Instagram, and paid for campaigns and paid for flyers just to be out there. It's not big money, but it has an impact, a positive impact. If we can then move to the next slide. Yeah, one more thing we've done with Crowdfunder. It's a funding it's a cause funding web platform, and they've offered their platform completely for free for businesses which were affected by COVID. And the idea was that we sold vouchers for reopening. So we call it double your money. So people would buy a £25 voucher now, and they will get £50 to spend in the restaurant when we reopen. And that campaign went very well. I mean, we raised over £5,000, and And again, it's this engagement. I mean, every person who's put a little bit of money has wrote a message to us, say, oh, Mosul, we love you, or we can't wait for you to reopen, or we're behind you. And just reading these messages and meant a lot to us, to the team, which again was great. You know, as the crisis prolonged, we also spoke to our local community, and we asked them what else they need. So they mentioned they wanted fresh produce boxes. So now we deliver fruit, veg, milk, and sort of other groceries. More recently, they've asked for gloves and masks, and now we stock gloves and masks as well. So, so almost anything the community comes back and say, "Can you get for us?" We're putting on our website, and then people can order. And I think one last and crucial point was that we managed to organize in a way that allowed us to gain access to all the government support and pretty much in a timely manner. I think kudos to the government for putting these campaigns in a pretty clear way. You know, the council communicated very early on that they were going to provide the grants and do 100% business rate discount. And later on, we got the clarity on the C bills, which later turned into B bills. And finally, the furlough came through. So quite a lot of help was offered by the government, but you had to be organized to get access to it. And again, we managed to. So this was just a short summary of everything we've done, and see if there's any more questions in the Q&A.
Amazing. Thank you, Barak.
Thank you, Kevin.
More great insight there, and you know, I've seen some other restaurants doing the vouchers and pledges and so on. So yeah, great advice, and you've clearly been keeping very busy and doing some great work in the community. So kudos for that. Finally, hi Alison.
Hi.
Before we move on to the Q&A, we have Alison from Yo. I'd have to say, I think apart from being the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the moment, I can't think of a much more difficult job than being a HR director of a large hospitality operator. You must have so much to deal with on the people side of things. So I'm really looking forward to hearing sort of what measures you've been putting in place at Yo to support your employees and prepare them for reopening.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It has been a particularly challenging time for us, but I think it's been a great opportunity for HR to really show the value that we can add as a function in the organisation. And you know, as much as we kind of led the business into this, we will be the ones to lead out of it and you know, kind of really push a successful agenda for our people and our teams. Wonderful. And get the first slide, please. So today I just wanted to talk through some of the things that myself and my team, I say my team, there's only 3 of us at the moment, have been working on. We don't really have a definitive date for reopening, so there are a lot of businesses I know that are currently opening and planning to kind of roll that out. Within Yo, we're just waiting to see and make sure we've got the right offer for our guests, and you know, our teams are fully looked after. So these are just some of the things that we've been working on as a team within Yo. We've been really working hard to communicate, and I think Barak and a couple of people have said how key this has been with our teams. So we've got 1,600 people all over the country, from Aberdeen to Plymouth and Belfast, and we've really wanted to keep them informed every step of the way, not just around furlough, but you know, keeping a check on their mental well-being and making sure they're coping with everything that's been going on. So we've been really working hard to educate the teams, inform them and involve them. Yo's been going for 23 years, and it's a cliche, but it is a real family. Our GMs have got really long tenure and they're really invested in the business, and what they say is really worthwhile listening to. So it's been important that we really involve them every step of the way. So we've just quite recently conducted what we've called an internal temperature check to speak to everybody in our team, really, whether you're a KP, team member, and just to get their feelings about how they view the possibility of going back to work, what their concerns are, you know, what they're particularly worried about. And then that has really helped us to shape our people plan so we can address those concerns for the team and they feel really listened to. We've got our teams involved in reopening plans, so we do weekly coffee and cake Zoom sessions with anybody who wants to drop in, really. And then we tell them what we've been up to as an exec team, what their thoughts, we get their thoughts on reopening plans, anything they've been reading or watching in the news that, you know, they think could be really beneficial to us as well. So we've been also speaking to our e-learning provider. I think when News of Furlough came out and there was, you know, kind of all the stuff about training, we really rushed to turn that off to make sure that we weren't jeopardizing any grants by having people training whilst they were on furlough. But once we understood the rules, we got that switched on. And our e-learning provider have been absolutely fantastic. They have released modules around COVID-19 in this time, and we've strongly recommended that our team complete them because there has been things on well-being as well, which has helped them personally. And they are also launching a suite of COVID-19 modules in early June. So everything from social distancing to you know, updated health and safety legislation. So that has really helped us as a team from not having to rewrite the rule book and, you know, having those modules there to release to the team. We've also scheduled refresh training, so before the team do come back to work, then we will run a food safety and health and safety refresh, so everybody's coming back with top knowledge and kind of that's fresh in their mind. We've also been sharing any online resources with teams, so anything that we found really beneficial and found that the teams would be interested in reading, then we've pushed that out to the teams just to keep their information up to date as well. And there's been some great stuff coming from, you know, particularly the likes of HIT. So they've just launched an infection control training course, so we're already enrolling some of our team members on that pre-opening. So again, knowledge is power, and we just believe that the more knowledge the teams will have, the more confidence they will have coming back to work, and the better the experience they will give to our guests. Can I just get the next slide, please? So as I mentioned about HR, I think, you know, how our time has really come, and, you know, I'm looking at, I've got a great relationship with our ops team and have really been adding input into the redesign of workspaces, and I would, you know, encourage any HR leader to be the same on that. This will really heavily influence our manpower planning going forward, short term and long term. What do our teams of the future look like? So it's really vital that HR have add that value there and have the input. With regards to social distancing, have you got a one size fits all model? We've got 69 restaurants of all different capacities, layouts, whether they're, you know, in a huge space in Heathrow or a tiny space in Daniels in Windsor. So we've been going through each floor plan individually and looking at what we can do now to plan for physical distancing and social distancing. And we planned that in 2 phases. So one for the July kind of opening around takeaway and delivery, and the second for dine-in. So we're ready to roll that out as and when. And we've really prioritised kitchen design. So it does mean a bit of a menu redesign, and we've been working closely together on that because that will dictate workstations. We are quite lucky in Yo that we have already those distinct workstations for sashimi preparation or hot food. So we've been, you know, kind of looking at how we can physically accommodate that in the kitchen to make sure that the chefs feel safe and there's enough space between them. We've been costing out and ordering things, look at such as possible sneeze screens, additional equipment for the chef, so everything they have is to hand on their station and they're not constantly going off to find a yellow chopping board or a green knife. They've got everything they need to hand, and that will minimize the time they need to go kind of and ask other people for things. And there's just not one area of the operation that you can really leave untouched. So everything from a walk-in fridge protocol to make sure there's only one person in the walk-in at any one time, to the pot wash area, which are traditionally really small areas. How do we manage that? So been really using this time usefully to go through those layouts really in depth. Can I get the next slide, please? And then finally, I think Christian talked about the COVID-19, the Black Sheep playbook, which has been fantastic, and we were working on something specifically for our teams that looks like that, which is really engaging and not a great manual of do's and don'ts around COVID-19, but really kind of educating them and giving them as much information as possible. And I must say there's been some great resources available. As an industry, we've really come together and are sharing best practice. So make sure that you're kind of obtaining all of that. There's some great resources on LinkedIn, and use your colleagues in the industry to ask what they're doing, particularly if they're one stage ahead and are already in that opening phase. The government guidance that was released last week was really good, and that's definitely been our base for our manual, and then we'll just tailor that accordingly. As I mentioned about the team, we get our teams involved in everything. You do need to elect health and safety reps for your risk assessment, so get that done now and get buy-in from the teams from the get-go, so they really do feel safe and involved around coming back to work. Can I get the next slide, please? And finally, think creatively. So we've been looking at a whole multitude of dummy rotors almost around what will a team look like when they reopen. So completely changing our hours so people are not travelling at peak times on public transport. A lot of our teams take public transport. We're in shopping malls where it's hard to drive to, so we just have to bear that in mind. We don't want them travelling at peak times, which they could feel a little bit unsafe about. If you've got a cycle to work scheme, really push that out, because that's what the government are really pushing at the moment in terms of cycling and walking. So if you have that already in your business, then they're pretty easy to set up if you work with a benefits and rewards provider as well. We're looking at having different teams, so we're minimising the contact between different employees, and they're not kind of exposed to the wider group within their business. We're looking at making sure the team are not travelling in uniform. We're sourcing professional laundry services, so we can get all of that done in-house. And then we're looking at any new PPE that we need. Face masks are not classed as PPE, but they are, their own thing around face covering. So will we be asking the team to wear them? That's something that we're debating at the moment as a team. And we're looking at staggering start and finish time. So again, looking at things like potential a night shift where we're prepping. So that will really minimise the people in the kitchen. We can't have 2 or 3 people in the changing rooms at any one time. So hence why we do need to stagger those start and finish times and make sure breaks are not taken at the same time as well. So all of this is going to be particularly difficult to, I think, enforce within our teams, because hospitality teams are social, they're gregarious, they like being together. But I think it's really kind of educating them and giving them the tools and resources to make sure they feel safe at work. So yeah, that's just some of the things we've been working hard on at Yo to make sure that when we do get the green light to go ahead, and we've decided to do that as a team, then all of our people feel really safe and confident about coming back to work.
Great, thank you, Alison. It's really interesting, some of the challenges on the people side, and I personally hadn't thought about the impact on things like the staff rota and uniform laundry, and so much to think about. That was really insightful. Thank you. Right, so it's time to take some of your questions. Slido is still open. Please go to www.slide.do, enter the code United We Stand, and ask us some questions, or vote on the ones that have already been posted. Just wait for everyone to just to sum up, I guess. Firstly, not surprisingly, we've got a long road to recovery ahead. Christian gave us some great insight and introduction, looking at the data and trends coming from other markets like China. Then we heard some great tips from Gil to help keep on top of the labour rules and taxes around the furlough scheme. James gave us some great examples of what businesses are doing to adapt and try and maintain a positive cash flow. Similarly, Barak's story, which I'm sure resonates with many of you, sort of highlights the resilience and agility needed to make quick changes and adapt your business model to the constantly changing environment. And finally, we just heard from Alison with some tips on how to manage your staff through the crisis and prepare your sites and operations for reopening. Okay, so we've got some questions here. The most popular question we have here is, can we enforce holidays, time off throughout furlough? Can we enforce holiday time off throughout furlough? So perhaps that's a question for maybe Gil.
Thank you for the question, and I'm going to look at Alison as a resident expert in HR to follow up with this. There are two things to consider. One is your employment agreements in place. So that is your first go-to. So whatever contracts you have with your staff will be the principal starting point for any discussion about enforcing holiday. ACAS, which is one of the key bodies that discusses HR issues in the UK, does say you can enforce it during furlough. But bear in mind, if they're on holiday, you have to pay them their full holiday wage. So if you're using the furlough cap to pay somebody, and that's the max, they are going to be owed their full wage during any time period that is classed as holiday. It is likely best, and this will definitely come down to communication and employee management, to get an agreement in place and make sure that you enforce it consistently. That will be absolutely critical. So first, check your contracts. You can always get good advice. There's plenty of good advice available in the market. Two, according to ACAS, you can. And three, make sure you engage your employees in the answer. And four, make sure you pay them the correct amount and track it so that you don't have someone come back to you and say you didn't pay me my holiday appropriately. Alison, if you have any follow-up on that, not sure if you do, but
you're absolutely right, Gil. So you just must make sure that you're giving your teams twice the notice period that they're taking. So if they want to take, well, if you're asking them to take a week's holiday, you must give them 2 weeks notice beforehand. So as you say, just be consistent. Make sure they understand that they will get 100% top up, but it's a difficult situation because you have to manage cash flow, but you also don't want a huge glut of holidays when the businesses reopen and everybody's trying to take a year's worth of holiday in 3 or 4 months. So it's a really tricky balance, and one that we're working through at Yo, definitely.
Cool. Hopefully that answers the question. All of these questions are anonymous. Not sure why, but the next most popular question is around home delivery. And specifically, the question being asked is, if everyone turns to home delivery, will the market not be saturated? And there'll be less income to each business, which may make it less which will make them less viable. Perhaps, Barak, given that you've kind of pivoted to that direction, have you got any insight on that?
I think there are two answers to this question, really. One is that was the situation before COVID. So if there were too many restaurants in your area, your market share would have been a proportion of that in any case. So whilst restaurants like mine enjoyed for a short while exclusivity in our area, it's true that we will now start feeling, and we are feeling, a slow decline in the level of orders. I mean, when you've got the likes of Franco Manca and Nando's or opening around you for deliveries, yeah, it will spread out the demand. So I think if I was to this, if I haven't done it until now, and I'm thinking now to start, it might be too late. That's my best guess. If you've done it so far, you've done well. But if you wanted to start now, I would say you need to take everything into consideration. There's costs, you need to bring staff back from furlough. You need to ensure the delivery drivers. You need to build the platform. You need to market it. And for the next, in 4 or 5 weeks, we might be allowed to trade slowly. So yeah, that's my best answer.
Cool. Thank you, Barak, and maybe Christian
yeah.
from a kind of data point of view. I mean, is the market becoming oversaturated?
I think it's hard to say, as Barak was hinting at. At the moment, when at the last webinar, we talked about how the supermarkets in the UK typically cater for 50 to 60% of all meals in the UK, and at the peak they were doing 95% of all the meals out there. Clearly, people will be getting bored of that to a certain extent, and wanting to go back to their usual staples. And if you see the pent up demand, I'm sure a lot of you will have seen videos of long queues of cars at drive-throughs for KFCs and others, where they've been waiting. That demand's like basically been building up, and then suddenly like people are allowed to go. So that's coming. There's a lot more demand coming through there. I think fundamentally it depends on a couple of things. One is, how well does your food travel? So is it food that people would typically think of ordering, and does it travel well? And two is like, how strong is your brand, and will you stand out on like delivery platforms amongst the audience that's there? So but yeah, I think, as to Barak's point, is if there is a finite pool of people, and the more people that go and do this, the more competition there will be.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Another question here is, how do we rebuild customer confidence to come back when told it's safe? Maybe that's something you can provide some insight into, James. I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to answer in fullness, because we're still waiting to find out what parts and how things can start to open up after the beginning of July. So pubs, for example, might well be delayed from other businesses. But making sure that you've got a really concise story of what you're doing to support your staff and your customers in your processes and health and safety, and how you're going to be looking after them, I think is really going to start being a very important part of that comfort factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, James. The next question we've got here is, it's all very well having a 3-month mortgage or rent holiday, but after that, most small cafes and restaurants will not have the capital to survive. Barak, given you were kind of suggesting that we shouldn't treat this as a holiday, you've got to work on smaller solutions and marketing and so on. Have you got any sort of additional thoughts on that?
Yes, and it is a concern. And the longer, I mean, even our best estimates did not see this lasting for this long. So we thought we were going into a 2 weeks lockdown, and maybe a 4 weeks lockdown, and then maybe a 6 weeks lockdown. But we're looking at 3 to 6 months now until we can all come back to business. So and rent is a big item on your expenses, on your expense list. I think the government will pull through maybe, but otherwise when you plan for cash, you have to start with, and again I think James spoke about it, your tipping point and your break-even point. You have to start with the absolute essentials. I mean, it's a cruel world, but if you have to choose, you need to pay your rent because without your premises, you have no business to run. So this was the assessment we've made, and maybe James can double up on that. But our assessment was that we will make some payments by hook, or by crook, as it says, and some payments we will defer, and rent is a high priority for us. Plus, at best, you will get a deferral, so you won't get a discount. What they will say is, don't pay me rent for 3 months, but then pay those 3 months spread over the next 6. So you're going to get hit by increased rent down the line. So I would rather just pay it off now and not collect this debt behind me. That's my point.
And James, would you say the same on that?
Well, I'd agree with where Barak's heading there. You know, we've seen some clients manage to get up to 90% reduction in rent, and there's little or no point in storing up that 10% as a cost. So whatever you can do at any point to start generating revenue to cover that cost, it's just going to leave you in a better position in 3 months' time. And if you can make an additional bit of profit on top of that by hook or crook, then we should all be trying to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe just sort of going back to the question or the area about, you know, the gradual process of building up confidence again, and I wonder what Alison's thoughts are, you know, given that you've got, you know, such a large number of staff and such a large number of sites. You know, how do you see that happening? Are there any sort of trends geographically, perhaps?
Yeah, we are definitely looking at, when we do reopen, we're looking at clusters. Obviously, a lot of our restaurants are in transport hubs, such as, you know, St Pancras, Heathrow. We also have a lot of our larger restaurants in shopping malls. So we know that people are going to be probably staying away from those enclosed areas for now. So we're really looking at ones on high streets, and, you know, kind of opening in clusters to take advantage of locality and geographic spread.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more here for yourself, Gil, regarding deferred taxes. There's a few people asking about this. One particular question says that it's unlikely that businesses will be able to meet the deferred tax liability when they become due. Have you got any insight into whether HMRC might continue to defer that?
Well, first of all, we're not tax people, so let me be very clear about that. But what we're seeing so far is that the deferrals were originally for a 90-day time period. And interestingly, this matches something that's happening with landlords. Just as an aside, landlords will defer rent, but they generally will not forgive it because they have covenants to make. So similarly with HMRC, they're deferring it, but for different reasons. And originally it's 90 days. What we have been told with our own interaction with HMRC on behalf of clients is that, yes, we're deferring it for 90 days, but we're going to be putting payment plans in place for everyone. The tax is still due. That's never been a pretense that it won't be due, but they will work with businesses. One of the things that we have experienced over the years when engaging, and we're very careful where we engage with HMRC on behalf of clients because our focus is PAYE and NI, but we do find that HMRC doesn't want to put a business under. That's not their objective. Their objective is to collect what's owed to them. So I think what we'll find, and this is a supposition, but I think what we'll find is they will negotiate and they will be very flexible over the timeframes of those payments, as long as you stick to whatever plan you put in place. That does mean you have to have your cash flow down. That does mean you have to have everything costed out. And just as Barak said earlier, communication is critical. So HMRC will respond. They will work with you. That's been our experience so far, and that's what we anticipate, because this isn't something that's an individual company. They know that. This isn't something that you've specifically done or avoided. So they have a pretty clear understanding that this isn't one business calling with one singular problem. They've made a mistake. This is across the entire UK. So that's what we see so far, and I remain quite hopeful, actually, the way government's responded thus far, that they'll continue to find room for flexibility for everybody on this.
Awesome, thank you, Gil. And just one final question, conscious of time, but we'll try and just, if we can all answer this one really quickly, hopefully we can end on something positive. So hopefully the answer to this is yes. If the government doesn't step in on rents, and I guess we can widen that to general government support and support for restaurants in general, can the industry get through the other side? And I'll ask Alison first.
Yeah, 100%. I think the hospitality industry is just the best industry, and I think how we've come together as a collective, what things like Kate Nichols and UK Hospitality have been doing has been phenomenal. You know, we're such a passionate group of people. We're collaborative. We are, you know, kind of, we think outside the box. So yeah, it will come through, and we'll be much stronger for this, 100%.
Cool. And Gil?
Yeah, without question. My top clients, best people I've worked with for 20 years, Peach Pubs, Trinity Restaurants. You go check out what these guys are doing and how they're expecting not just to survive, but thrive. And my local, the Fox and Pheasant, 50 feet from my door. I met the GM the other day, and they're already, you know, they're ready to come back. This is an industry with energy, and they're ready to make it work.
And Christian?
Yep, I'll echo that. Definitely been very impressed by how the innovation we're seeing from a lot of people in the industry, and to Alice's point, how the whole industry's come together and really try to speak to as one voice to the government, and really pulled through. So I'm very optimistic.
Good. And Barak, can we get through this?
Of course. I think the demand is there, man. I take a lot of courage from stories from United States that one governor said open the restaurants, and they had to take armed police to get people off the, the restaurants. So as soon as people will be allowed out, I believe they will be out in force. And as long as businesses can, you know, like Alison said, you know, demonstrate that they're managing it in a safe way, the demand is there. It's not going to go away, and we'll definitely be here.
Cool. And yourself, James?
Yeah, definitely. It's such an amazing sector to have so many resourceful and innovative people working within it. And there's always challenges that come up. Many years ago, it was national minimum wage coming in, and everybody was saying that that's going to bring the industry down. And everyone finds a way around it, no matter what happens or where it goes. People aren't going to stop wanting to eat and eat out, breaking bread and sharing stories. They love it.
Amazing. Well, look, first and foremost, thanks to all the panelists and speakers today. We've just gone a little bit over, so we're out of time now. I'd just like to end by saying a massive thank you also to everyone who's joined us to watch and listen. I hope you found the session interesting, and I really hope that there's something that you can all take away and implement in your own operation. We'll share the slides and the recording with you afterwards, and myself, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the other speakers when I say we're happy to help further where and when possible. Once again, thank you all for joining. Stay safe. Bye for now.